late 1864, the Civil War was grinding to a close, and the Confederacy was on its very last legs. By late 1864, the Army of Tennessee, big division of the Confederate Army, had been pushed from Nashville to Murfreesboro. They'd been pushed out of Coffee County, out of Chattanooga, and they were all the way down in Atlanta. And it's in Atlanta that General Hood of the Army of Tennessee is going to make a decision that he's going to lead his men back across Alabama, north into Nashville, and he is going to retake Nashville from the Union Army where they had been since early in the war. Now, that was a fatal miscalculation on the part of Hood, because at that time, Nashville was the most fortified city in the United States other than Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. Nevertheless, Hood is going to go on with his plan. Well, the first mistake that he would make, according to historians, is that when he arrived in southern Middle Tennessee on the eve of the battle, he allowed a division of the Union Army to slip behind him in the Spring Hill area in order to prepare for this attack that they knew was coming. Most historians believe had Hood attacked that Union division before they got into position, his chances would have been better, because at that point they would have outnumbered that little faction of the Union Army. But Hood didn't. He let that division get into place. And the next morning, when he realizes what he has done, which he didn't think it was his fault, of course, but according to his generals, he was as agitated as a snake, and he was ready to attack. And Hood is going to order his Army of Tennessee, his Confederates, to make a full-on frontal assault on the Union Army. That is, instead of outmaneuvering and outflanking and doing the kind of things that were common during the war, he's going to send his men head on into the Union, face first into this death machine. And it was a terrible idea. His generals tried to talk him out of it. He wouldn't listen, and instead he ordered that attack to occur. Here is an artist rendering of the Battle of Franklin, and you can see that the Union Army is at a hill. They've got full artillery at their disposal, and these Confederates are coming in rank right into this death machine. And that battle was going to rage on for hours. It started late in the day. And the Battle of Franklin is going to take place in the front yards of the Canton Plantation and the Carter House. And the people in those homes had been awoken around daybreak, and their homes were taken over as headquarters. And when the battle started, the people who lived in those homes left diaries in which they described being huddled in the basement with their neighbors and friends and hearing this terrible destruction occurring in their front yards. Well, the Confederates are going to try 6 times to dislodge the Union, and all 6 times they're going to be repulsed. Eventually, around nightfall, the Union Army is going to cross the Harpeth River and fall back into Nashville. But that does not mean that the Confederates have won the Battle of Franklin. No, it was a devastating loss. Hood was going to lose a majority of his men in that attack at Franklin. Even worse, he would have 12 of his leading generals suffer casualties. 6 of them would die. People describe the bodies of those 6 Confederate generals being stacked up on the porches of those plantations. And in one of the saddest moments of the war, Todd Carter, a Confederate soldier who had fought in a couple of major battles before the Battle of Franklin, would be killed in his own front yard of the Carter plantation. His brother would recover his body at nightfall. So when the Battle of Franklin was over, the Confederacy, the Army of Tennessee, was mortally wounded. But Hood is not finished. A couple of weeks later, he's going to attempt an attack on Nashville, again against orders. And again, his Confederates are going to be dealt a death blow. Historians like to say that at Franklin, Hood dealt his army of Tennessee a fatal blow, and in Nashville 2 weeks later, he went ahead and killed it. After the battles of Franklin and the Nashville, Hood had lost 75% of the Army of Tennessee in 2 battles that were ill-advised and against the recommendations of his own generals. After the Battle of Nashville, he would take his army and slip back into the Deep South, but for all effects, the Army of Tennessee was no more after those 2 battles. Now, the Carton Plantation, one of the homes where the Battle of Franklin occurred in their front yard, you can tour that home, and it's a remarkable and heartbreaking thing to do, because in the upstairs bedrooms of the Carton Plantation, which is where the surgeons did their work, it was repurposed into a hospital because of all of the dead or all of the dying in their front yard. There are bloodstains still on the floor where the blood soaked into the wooden boards. And here's something amazing. No one knew that was there because over time the Carton Plantation had fallen into private owners' hands, and in sometime all the floors were carpeted. And when that home was purchased by the Battlefield Trust, I believe, in the 1970s, and they took the carpet out, imagine their astonishment at what they were seeing, history on those floors. And it was a sad reminder of the dying and suffering that occurred by Tennesseans and Americans all across this nation during the time of this Civil War.